Welcome to Tell Us Something. Welcome back. We survived the winter. Oh, wait. This is my new reality. All right. Thanks for coming out tonight to support live storytelling in Missoula. Tell Us Something is proud to be fiscally sponsored by the Missoula Community Foundation. This event will be videotaped by Missoula Community Access Television as part of its Media Assistance Grants Program to nonprofit organizations. For more information about the grant program, please contact MCAT at 542-6228. Big thanks to our sponsors, the Top Hat Lounge, the Wilma, CabinetParts.com, the bookstore at the University of Montana, Fact and Fiction Books, Missoula Broadcasting Company, Gecko Designs, Find, Martin McCain Woodworks and Design, and we are proud to welcome our newest sponsor, the Good Food Store. When you frequent these businesses, please thank them for their support of Tell Us Something and for their support of live storytelling in Missoula. Please silence your cell phones and other mobile devices. You came to listen. Let the listening begin. You are Tell Us Something, and Tell Us Something is you. Without your ears, without your stories, there is no Tell Us Something. We are sharing a unique experience together this evening in a way that is not possible with radio or podcasts, although Tell Us Something does produce a weekly podcast, and you can occasionally find us on Montana Public Radio. Please subscribe to the Tell Us Something podcast using your favorite podcasting app. It is important to actively listen to each other, to join together, and to support one another. Thank you for your support of each other and of each other's stories. Every Tell Us Something event is focused on a theme. Tonight's theme, don't look back. Angela Miller is a 30-something Seattle-born Montana transplant. She is the mother of two wonderful boys, affectionately known as the A-Team, and one zany Labrador. She's passionate about cancer awareness, autism awareness, coffee and cookies, preferably with walnuts. Angela recently returned to school full-time to figure out what she wants to be when she grows up. Please welcome Angela Miller.
Hello. In 1987, Emily Pearl Kingsley wrote a poem titled Welcome to Holland. And it has become pretty much the unofficial battle cry of any parent that has a child with special needs. The gist of it begins with the premise that you're going to fly to Italy, and you prepare for this beautiful trip to Italy by reading about wine and cities and Venice and all of these wonderful places that you're going to go. And before you arrive, you find out that your flight has been diverted to Holland, and there's no turning back. So you land on the tarmac, very disappointed that you're not going to go to Italy, but still trying to get your head around the fact that you're now going to be in Holland. And as things kind of come to solidify in your mind that this is where, in fact, you're going to be, you start to appreciate the finer things about Holland. Tulips and windmills and everything there is to know about living in Holland. So I'm going to tell you about my trip to Holland. In 2008, after 3 hours of labor, I was blessed with a beautiful, wonderful 10-pound, 4-ounce baby boy. Yeah, hold your applause. And I looked at my little guy and I was like, you know what, you are beautiful in all of your wrinkly, alien, wonderful goodness. And I brought him home to his older brother, and in the infallible thought of raising children, I thought, these two are going to be exactly alike. And I could not have been more incorrect. The first 2 years of Aaron's life was spent me doing this. And I turned to my husband and I said, you know, hon, I really don't think he's like his brother. To which my husband replied, what? So we kind of reached an agree to disagree moment where I felt that perhaps something wasn't quite right, and my husband's wisdom was, well, he's not going to be like his brother. And to which I was like, well, yeah, no shit, look at him. And so here I've got these two beautiful boys, and they look exactly alike, but they could not have been more different. So we took him to the doctor, like most good parents would do. And I'm laying out the fact that, you know, well, he sucks his thumb and he lines up his cars and he makes these weird rituals of, you know, having to kiss me before he gets out of the car. Not that I don't love his kisses, but this is getting to be a little ridiculous, because if I don't let him kiss me before we get out of the car, then all hell breaks loose for the next 3 hours. And I'm explaining this to the doctor, and I can tell that he's concerned, but he's not overly concerned. So the wisdom became, well, let's test him when he's 3. And I figured that was fine. You know, that at least calmed things to a dull roar. I still had the stupid look on my face half the time of, but at least I knew that if I just waited this out, by the time he turned 3, if things didn't get better, that he would be tested. For what? I didn't know. Some perpetual weird child disease, Hot Wheels cars lineuperosis, any number of afflictions, but autism never crossed my mind. Autism was just one of those things that happened to other people's children. Certainly didn't happen to my kid. So by the time he rolled around to his 3rd birthday, his father was already 3 rounds into chemotherapy and looking at a 4th. So we had to wait because I was juggling chainsaws. I could devote all of my time and attention to my 3-year-old who was still from another planet, or I could devote all of my time and effort to taking care of his terminally ill father. Fast forward, Aaron is now 4 years and 9 months old, and I find myself catatonic, looking through a one-way glass, not too far from here, where he is, in fact, diagnosed with autism. And the folks that checked him out, they came out into the room, and it was this very somber experience. And I'm just kind of like, okay, what are you going to tell me? The kid has some fucking itis. What's it going to be? Still, autism was just not even on the radar. And they said, well, we're very sorry, Miss Miller, but your son has autism. And I looked at them and I went, yeah, okay. And that was a really defining moment, because we could have gone one of 2 directions. It could have been this horrible, terrible moment where I felt that I had lost this child forever to autism, this horrible, pervasive developmental disorder that never gets better. And if you look at autism, there's a long list of nevers, of what they can't do and what they don't do and what they shouldn't do and what they're never going to do. But then there's also this great big list of all the things that they can do. And then there's all the things that you wouldn't even ever imagine that they would do. Like love apps on iPhones called Fart Studio. It's seriously, people, I can't make this up. Look it up, it exists. So there exists out there this app called Fart Studio, and my son is in love with it. So we have this moment where I can do one of 2 things, because this isn't about me. This isn't my diagnosis. This is my son's diagnosis. I can yell and scream and bitch and moan and throw a fit that I got this kid that I didn't want. Who doesn't want, who wants a kid with autism? Who wants to look at this list of all these horrible things and all these comorbid conditions? But I did want him because he was still the same kid. We walked into that day with a 4-year-old, 9-month-old boy who was still the same kid when he walked out. He just had a new label. He just had a new thing about him that we knew. But he was still Aaron. And he was still this quirky, wonderful kid who liked to suck his thumb and had weird routines and occasionally liked to flood the bathroom and occasionally liked to put his glasses on the Christmas tree so that I could not find them, and he liked to kiss me before he got out of the car. So when you look at, okay, this is all the things he's not going to be, and have that glass half empty. Or you can look at the other side of the coin and have this glass half full and know about things like Fart Studio. I mean, who doesn't want Fart Studio in their life? So when I look back on that day, I can look back on one of two things. I can look back as the day that I thought my child was not the child that I thought he was going to be, that I had suffered some kind of loss. Because every time I'd heard, "I'm sorry," it was in such a different context. It was always in the context of a loss. "I'm so sorry your husband died. I'm so sorry your mother died. I'm so sorry that you didn't get the job." Or, it was always in the context of not having something. But I realized that I did. I still had that same beautiful 10-pound, 4-ounce baby boy that blew through my pelvis on a Wednesday morning. He was still the same kid. So and to make it about me, to be selfish, I don't have to be saddled with this, "Oh, well, I have this child who's autistic," because it's really the other way around. He is a child with autism. And in him, I really learned a lot about myself. And I learned a lot about his brother, who I thought he was going to be exactly like. And of course, he's not anything like his brother Alex. But it's awesome. Because they're so different, they complement each other so well. And in him, I found the strength to do a lot of things that I don't think I ever would have done. And one of them, of course, was going back to school. And every opportunity that I've had through the last 2 years of finishing my degree, I've devoted to finding out more about autism. And in that respect, more about him and more about myself and really more about people. So I don't look back on the day that he was diagnosed with autism as the day of loss. I look back on the day that he was diagnosed with autism as the day of really beginnings. And it was the day that I discovered that I had a tour guide to Holland, and he is fucking awesome.
Thank you, Angela, and thanks to that fucking awesome tour guide. It's like my mom. Where are my glasses? Travis Doria moved across the country to Missoula just 2 years ago. He is enjoying the Montana lifestyle after growing up in Maryland and living in the great state of West Virginia for 8 years. He was lucky enough to convince his amazing wife, Rachel, to move to Montana with him. They now live on the south side of town with their cat, Herbert. Travis works as a forensic chemist in town and has no experience writing or telling stories. He listens to plenty of story podcasts, which is kind of the same thing. Please welcome Travis Doria.
Should be good. Thanks, Mark. Hey there, Missoula. So I was standing in the back of my high school jazz band class with the rest of the trumpets, and the band director looks up at me and says, "Travis, this Friday, to start the pep rally, you are going to play taps." So just 2 days previously, the audiovisual technician at the school was setting up some lights in the auditorium before church that Sunday, and he had fallen from the balcony and unfortunately passed away. They had found him there that Sunday morning. Yeah, it was a big tragedy for the school. So the principal specifically asked for me to play taps to start a pep rally. I know, right? Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, taps is a relatively easy song. It's only 24 notes on a trumpet. You don't even have to use your fingers. It's traditionally played on a bugle. It was originally used in military installations to signify the end of the day, the sun setting, whenever you would lower the flag for the end of the day. And was later adapted to signify the end of a life of a soldier and was played at military funerals. So there's a lot of weight behind this song, and 18-year-old awkward me was destined to do it, I guess. So the band director smartly told me, you know, you're going to do this on Friday, and I said, oh, yeah, I could definitely do that. That's not a problem. Don't worry about it. And he smartly said, okay, play it for us right now. And it was in front of my jazz band, which is like 15 folks, and I was like, yeah, I could play it. And so raised my horn, and I play it poorly at best. Whenever you're holding out long sustained notes, you can really hear whenever you're out of pitch or you miss some, and everybody in the band knew, you know. And so the director said to me, you're really gonna have to practice before Friday before you play it in front of the whole school. And I would have liked to say I practiced more, but I was a senior in high school and there's other things going on. So like that was on Tuesday, and maybe Wednesday I played video games and did some homework, and Thursday I might have practiced a little, but you know, hang out with friends. So Friday rolls along and I'm under practice and you know, slightly nervous, but this is happening, it's going down. So for pep rallies, I think it was the homecoming game, they generally let everybody else out the last 2 periods for class. So everybody's in a great mood, and my entire school is filtering out into our huge bleachers. We just got a year or 2 before that, these huge 3-story bleachers. And just as a reference, my home county in Maryland that I grew up in has the same population as the state of Montana. Yeah. So there's like over 2,000 plus students there that day. And you know, it's Friday, everyone's excited. I'm excited about the football game, so everyone's feeling jubilant and sitting in the stands, and I'm standing on the sideline with my trumpet and warming up and standing with the band director, and he's like, all right, you're gonna walk out whenever they call you, and which I don't know when that's gonna be. So, you know, the MC comes on for the pep rally and gets everyone ready, and they're like, who's ready for the homecoming game tonight? And everyone's like, yeah, woo! We're gonna beat Northwest tonight. And everyone's like, yeah, woo! And he goes, and now to honor the memory of John Horvat, here is Travis Doria to play taps. And everyone goes dead silent. And I had no idea it was coming, so there's nothing I can do at that point. It's happening, so I take my trumpet and I walk out the 20-yard line. I walk past the big 2 and 0 up to the hash mark, turn around and point my bell towards the center of the bleachers. And people later asked me if I was nervous going up there, and it wasn't really nerves, but you know, I knew this was gonna happen and I had to do it, so whether or not it went well, it was happening. I was here. So I take my bell, look at my entire student body, point it towards the center of the crowd. Da da da, da da da, da da da. Da da da, da da da, da da da, da da da, da da da. And I thought of a lot of ways it could have gone, and a lot of different things that could have gone wrong. But the one thing I didn't consider is that after playing a solo by myself in the middle of the field in front of all these people, is that nobody claps. It's just me still in the center of the field, and everyone's like, And so I just run off the field. I don't know, just get off the field. And the band director says, good job, and one or two other people say good job. But, I kind of left not feeling much of anything. It was, it's done, and then we had the pep rally. And I didn't really know how to feel until the next day. I got to my English class, and I was greeted at the door by my English professor, and he profusely thanked me. He said, "Oh, Travis, thank you so much for doing that yesterday. That was so great, and I'm so glad you did that. That was so great for Mr. Horvath. Thank you, thank you." And so I felt awkward for that because I kind of taken myself out of that and stopped thinking of it. And so I felt awkward, and I was like, okay, I just want to just sit. And so I sat in my chair, and then whenever the bell rings and everybody's there, he then forces the entire class to applaud for me. They're like, "Oh, tell Travis how good of a job he did," yeah. And so I just sink in my chair and want to disappear and just felt awkward about the situation. But what I didn't realize is that it took me several years to realize is that the whole playing of taps and that whole story isn't really about me and what I did. It was about a tragic loss that we as a school we lost our audiovisual technician, John Horvath, who is a member of the community. He made sure that the gears of the school always turned well with his prowess. And large showings of grief are rare. And I think it was pretty admirable that the entire student body took, 30 seconds before pep rally to recognize that. So with that, the story is for him. Thank you all.
Thanks, Travis. Keep forgetting this. Sam Martinich was born and raised in Missoula. He left to hitchhike for a few years before recently returning. Currently, he fills his time installing dishwashers and slinging burritos. In his time off, he enjoys drinking tasty beers and getting beaten up by nerds. That's what he said. Please welcome Sam Martinich.
Hi, Mammy. So, nestled in the mountains in Northern California, just directly south of Mount Shasta, there's this hidden valley, this real fertile land that you have to follow a long, windy road to get to. There's a lot of geothermic activity with hot springs peppering the river along the way. It was one of the last settled areas in America because of its remoteness. Now, the first property that you pass going into this place called Big Bend is a little place called the Duck Farm. It got its name because there is a couple who won the lottery in California. Their kids had all grown, and they wanted to try and live the country lifestyle. Well, being completely inexperienced, they came out here, bought some ducks, and tried to raise them, and the ducks started getting sick. To try and nurse them back to health, they brought them inside and tried to bring them back in the farmhouse. But the ducks, being living things, did what all living things do, and shat all over the place, leaving their excrement everywhere, just layers and layers of it. To the point where they forced the family out of the farmhouse and into one of the outlying buildings on the property. And soon enough, these ducks started to die. And this couple, not knowing what to do, decided to stick these duck carcasses into one of the chest freezers on the porch there and then leave. So this farmhouse, it stayed like that for a few years until there was a group of rainbow gathering hippies who decided that they wanted to try and purchase this property to make a permaculture design farm and learning center and community gardens, with the premier project being there a 2-acre hugel culture maze. Now, hugel culture is where you take piles of wood and cover them over with dirt. Over time, the wood breaks down, enriching the soil. These are about 10 feet tall, and we're using a full-size excavator to create, and they're just pouring resources into it. The community really didn't get behind it with that, and then, of course, being hippies, they brought their friends to come work on the farm. And so the place kind of gathered the reputation of a party scene squat house. Now, around this time, I'd been out hitchhiking, and I'd made friends with a gal who had gotten herself pregnant in Portland from one of the local street kids. But we were... That wasn't a funny part. We were looking for a place for her to give birth and reconnect with her family who were dealing with their business in Texas. And we heard about this place where one of the families that was there had a baby in the back bathroom. So we made our way out there, and when we first pulled in, the first person to come out to greet us was a woman in a frilly pink tutu wearing a sombrero who came out and shouted, "Welcome to Big Bend, Yoni of the Earth." Yeah, and this family was going to be leaving soon. At this time, the people who kind of started the project were focused on their own personal properties. So we were kind of passed on that mantle of manager of this farm when we had no experience doing that. The husband there, he said to me right before they left, "Have fun hurting the anarchists." Too true. So we had our own responsibilities in it. This woman who I was traveling with that was looking to give birth to a baby, she was writing grants, or grant proposals, and trying to work with the nonprofit status of this zany project. While meanwhile, I was being trained on the excavator after smoking a joint with the fella who trained me. That excavator nearly killed me, by the way. I just picked up a load of wood and went to load it on the dump truck. Didn't notice one of the treetops sticking out, and it whipped across the cab and across my throat, and leaving a bruise. I just dropped the load I had and was, nope, done. But we continued doing this work for a couple of months. And this baby is born in the back bathroom, the second one at the duck farm. My goddaughter, Lyra Lee. And after this near-death experience, it was really, it drove the point home for me of the fragility and tenacity of life and the importance that it keeps changing, keeps going forward. But yeah, we continue on, and because of all these different people that keep coming in, these Shanti crystal hippies and these crusty train kids and a garden guru con man and an actual permaculture expert that probably could have driven the farm quite a bit. Yeah, actually, some of these kids wanted to dig a hobbit hole and ended up going out digging a 6-foot wide hole about a foot deep, and then left our shovels out there. I had to go on a scavenger hunt to go find them. But we started really trying to narrow in who we brought into this project, because otherwise it was going to go nowhere. So we brought in a family that had their own farm animals who, really actually did up the productivity there. But and also the wife of this couple was pregnant and wanted to give birth in the back bathroom too. They did successfully, making it the third baby born in the duck farm. But they kind of shifted around this power structure that had been created where we were all vying for our own sense of security, our own place. And yeah, they turned it on its head, brought their friends in, and soon enough, we were asked to leave, kind of using the same tactics that we had used to encouraged the other rabble to go. And thankfully, we had created enough of a friendship through in the community there to move down the road to a trailer and have a safe place to land. But and at that time, this woman who I'd been traveling through, who'd given birth, I'd forgotten to mention her name earlier. It was Spider. Her family was able to rejoin with her and kind of reunite, and it was really powerful in that I got to witness a family that had been broken by different issues and seen them reunited, with a new baby and with her son and her husband back. And at that point, it was kind of up to me if I wanted to leave or not. And so I did. I came back to Missoula, my home, and tried to build myself back up. And I kept in contact with everyone down there, with a deep love for them. And, pardon me. This cycle of the duck farm, it continued. They, the couple that had encouraged us to leave, they themselves were asked to leave too. And 2 more babies were born in the back bathroom, making it for a total of 5. But this winter, under the weight of all of the different ideas and projects and desires of the different people that were there, they didn't quite keep up on the upkeep, the maintenance of the place. And with the heavy snowfall we had this winter, the roof collapsed. And everyone was okay, no one was hurt, but they were all forced to leave. And it's really encouraging, the death of the duck farm there, because it really opened up for the community to come back into its original goal of a community gardens. And it really led the way for that continuation, and the HoHos are productive. But it drove home for me that everything is going to change. Everything will eventually move on. Learn what you can in every moment. Don't look back. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed telling it.
Thank you, Sam. Oh, man. I'm not trying to be funny. Giorgio was born in a car wreck in France on the way to Italy in 1928. George's father moved the family to Chile at the age of 4, where he grew up working in his father's wooden ship boatyard. In 1947, at the age of 17, George joined an American expedition to Antarctica, becoming the youngest person ever to spend a year there. George lived a month alone on the Palmer Peninsula Plateau and was the first to cross from the Atlantic to the Pacific by dog sled, with a joint British-American party. He has a mountain named after him, the Giorgio Mountain. George then spent the next 30 years sailing the world's oceans. George was the navigator on the ship Mischief for the famous English explorer H.W. Tillman. He also hunted for Sir Francis Drake's lost treasure on Robinson Crusoe Island. For the past 8 years, George has worked at the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center and Cascade Historical Society in Great Falls, Montana. Please welcome George DiGiorgio.
Hello. I grew up in a shipyard where my father built sailing ships, and I started sailing when I was around 9 or 10 years old. At 18, I became a captain of sailing ships, and in 1954, that was a long time ago, I was sent to Tahiti, which is about 5,000 miles from Valparaiso, Chile. We were taking a cargo of Chilean wine, copper goods, rice, and other items from Chile to Tahiti. And then on the way back, we would bring mother of pearl, vanilla, and coconut, copra. Our first stop was 4,000 miles away in the island of Mangareva. Mangareva hadn't had a boat from another country come in for 10 years, so we were the first vessel to come to the island from another part of the world in 10 years. The French sent one ship once a year to supply them. So we got to the island. It had only about 300 inhabitants and the little town of Rikitea. We came through the pass into the lagoon, tied up, and the first person who came on board in a black robe was Father Michel. He said, I am the spiritual leader of these people. And we invited him to come below and have a cup of coffee, but he said, could I have a glass of wine? And then after he tasted this good Chilean wine, he said, you know, I have no wine to consecrate for Mass, so could I have a couple liters? So we gave him 2 bottles of Chilean wine, Concha y Toro, and when he left, the boat was called a Cervalabari. She was a Dutch-built schooner. Then the chief of the island came on board, and he said, Captain, you know, you come from so far away. We wish we could show you our old ways, our way of dancing, our singing, and would you authorize us to do this? I said, well, I can't authorize you for anything. He said, yes, you can. You're the captain. So he said, well, in 3 days, we will have a performance of our dancers and our songs, Polynesian. He got off the boat, and that evening we could hear the drums and the singing in the jungle. The priest came back on board. He said, Captain, I have to talk to you. What are you doing? You're authorizing these people who have been guiding for so many years, making them forget their old pagan ways and their dances and this lascivious behavior. So I said, well, you know, I can't go back on my word. We're going to let them do their presentation. He said, well, while you are watching this pagan feast, I will be praying for you in the chapel. The day of the performance, we had on board some magnesium flares, you know, the ones they used during World War II to light up runways, stuff like that. We said, well, we want to take pictures of this event. I sent 2 of my crew members to tie the flares underneath the 2 big breadfruit trees where they were going to have the ceremony. And like that, we could light up and take some pictures. When the time came and the priest was supposed to be praying in the chapel, the dancers came, they started dancing. My first mate went and lit the flares, and it threw a big light, and all of a sudden we heard something like a bird falling off the tree, you know, breaking branches and landing in the middle of the dancers. It was Father Michel. He was watching the performance. We laughed. It was so incredible that we didn't take any pictures. He walked back to the chapel, and the next morning he came on board. He said, Captain, you can redeem yourself by doing me a big favor. My generator isn't running. I need to send it to Tahiti. Tahiti was 1,000 miles west of where we were in the island of Mangareva. He said, if you take my generator, I'll give you a log of ironwood. Ironwood is very hard, precious wood used for furniture and sculptures and things like that. I said, okay, I'll take your generator. And then the next morning they came with a wheelbarrow and brought me his little generator. And some other of the inhabitants brought the ironwood log. We put this on deck and we sailed towards Tahiti, which, like I said, was 1,000 miles away. On the way, we said, well, why don't we stop at the island of Raivavai? It's a small island that has only about 50 inhabitants. And we needed water, and we wanted to get some more coconuts and mangoes and stuff. So we put into the lagoon of Raivavai, and we were greeted by the man who was the leader of the chief of the island. He was a male nurse. He was like the doctor of the place. He came on board, and when he saw the generator sitting there on deck, he said, "Oh my gosh, a generator. Is it running?" I said, "No, it's going for repair in Tahiti." He said, "I could repair it here." And I said, "You know, this Father Michel was really nasty. He did, I'm going to do something." I said, "You can have the generator." Then we sailed on to Tahiti, which is and we got there. I sold the ironwood log for a lot of money. And we unloaded our cargo and then sailed to Pitcairn Island, where the mutineers of the Bounty ended up, and then to Easter Island, and then back to Chile. And that was our adventure in the South Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, George. All right. Big thanks again to all of you for coming out tonight to listen to live storytelling of your community members. And thanks again to our sponsors, the bookstore at the University of Montana, the Good Food Store, cabinetparts.com, Top Hat Lounge, the Wilma, Fact and Fiction, Missoula Broadcasting Company, Gecko Designs, Find, and Martin McCain Woodworks and Designs. Also, huge thanks to Joyce Gibbs. Without Joyce, I don't know how I would be able to run Tell Us Something. She's the biggest reason Tell Us Something can happen, and she's amazing. Thanks, Joyce, for helping out tonight. For all you do, I love you. I don't know where you are. People often ask me how to sign up to tell a story at Tell Us Something. Go to tellussomething.org to see the themes for 2017. Click the link for the theme that resonates for you. Add your information to the form that will then display. And then call 406-203-4683 to pitch your story. You've got 3 minutes to pitch a shortened version of your story. We're going to take a short intermission, about 10 minutes, and we'll be back with more storytelling. Thank you so much. Welcome back. We had a last-minute dropout, so Mark Moss has lived in Missoula, Montana for 15 years. He is the founder of Tell Us Something. Please welcome Mark Moss. Thanks. Wow, so nervous. I really am nervous. In January of 2011, I was starting to learn how Twitter works, and I'm still trying to figure that out, if anyone wants to teach me. But a guy named Patrick Dugans, I wish I remember what his handle was. I think it's Pat Dugans, at Pat Dugans. He was gathering groups of people to share true personal stories on the stage over at the Badlander. And he was calling his event Missoula Moth. And I have been a public speaker for most of my adult life. I was a teacher in Ohio for a while. I was a park ranger in Yellowstone National Park. and gave presentations to large groups of tourists, visitors. And I was a salesman for a while, and so I'm used to speaking in public, but I've never told my own story before. In fact, I thought I didn't have a story, but I signed up anyway to be a part of Missoula Moth that night in January. And I asked Pat if it was okay if I told my dad's story about how he met and fell in love with my mom in the first person as if I was my dad. Because it was a story I knew I wouldn't fuck up because I had grown up hearing it so many times. And he said, well, I guess you could try that. Because it was the first time and he needed storytellers, and so I did it. And I got really drunk because I was really nervous, and that is the number one thing to not do. Okay? I'm here to tell you, do not get drunk and try to tell a story. It's a bad idea, but I pulled it off. And it was the first time as an adult that I felt listened to and heard. Because they were listening to me, not what I was saying about geothermal pools and calderas and do you want to buy a portrait package or any of that. That was one of my jobs. I'll tell that story someday. And I fell in love with it. I felt empowered. I felt confident. I felt loved. And I wanted to do it again, sober this time. So Pat was somehow insanely doing this monthly. And the bar was full, and the bar was quiet. He also didn't have a theme, he didn't vet his storytellers, and he didn't have a time limit. So the stories sometimes went on for a really long time. And the Amsterdam story, right? I went to Amsterdam, it was awesome. I don't have any idea or any details as to why it was awesome, but I'm gonna tell you that it was awesome for 20 minutes. Like, there were stories like that. But, so, in February, I told a story about finding a dildo in a bush on my way to work. And I'm driving down the road, and wait, what? And I had 2 jobs at the time. I worked in a funeral home during the day, and I washed dishes at a restaurant similar to Ruby's Cafe at night. And so the next morning, after I got out of the funeral home, I grabbed some gloves and a bag. And I was driving along, and I'm hoping that it's still there, and it was. But that is a different story. The following month, I told a story about quitting a job, and in April, I told a story, I can't remember what it was about. And then Missoula Moth ended. And I thought, we should keep this going. And I spoke to some of the other storytellers, and they said, yeah, we should keep this going. This is great. And I said, when are we going to do it again? And no one returned my emails or answered my phone calls. And so I just kind of thought it was going to be the end of it. And so the art museum, Missoula Art Museum, called Patrick Dugans, who now lives in Bozeman, and said, hey, we want you to do Missoula Moth at the art museum for Artini. And Pat said, you know, Mark really likes this. I don't live in your town anymore. You should call Mark. And so they did. And I said, yes, I'll do it. And I'm going to tighten it up. And it's basically what you see right now. 10-minute stories, limited number of tellers, theme. And I also knew that I wanted this to be a long-term event. And I wanted to not have to fight New York City over the name. So the website crashed, and I had nothing to do with that. I didn't have any of the login information at the time. Nick Shantz did, and he said, I don't have time for this. He emailed me all the credentials. I rebuilt the website. Hey, Nick. I wasn't sure if you were here. Thanks for your support, though. Thanks for being here tonight. Nick was one of the guys who told a story at the Badlander, too, so I'm trying to get him back up here someday. Anyway, so I rebuilt the website in a CMS I had no idea how to use. And one thing I knew, like I said, I didn't want to fight New York City, after building something up. And so I linked to themoth.org from my website. And I know that someone at the Moth, that it's their job to look at analytics and figure out where all of this traffic is coming from and when, and all of a sudden they're getting all this traffic from Missoula, Montana. And I get an email from Maggie Sino, and she says, we really need to talk. And then I got a call from Joan, I can't remember what her last name is, but she was the executive director of the Moth at the time. And she said, please call me. And at the time I smoked cigarettes, and so I called her and I'm chain smoking, so nervous. And she says, you really need to change the name. And I said, I have an event coming up in a couple of weeks, and I've got posters all over town, and that would be really confusing for me to change the name before the event comes, so I can't do it. She's like, you have to do it. I said, then you're gonna have to send me a letter. And she said, do you know how much, do you know that we're a nonprofit? And I said, yeah. And she said, you're gonna make me get some lawyers? And I said, yeah, because you're a nonprofit, I know how much money you make. So she sent me a cease and desist letter. And the opening night of the time that I took over Missoula Moth, we changed the event and called it Tell Us Something. Because I wanted it to be an inviting name. I wanted people to come and listen to their community share stories. What I didn't want was people to come and listen to some big name share a story, because we do have some big names in Missoula. And I don't want somebody to say, are you going to tell us something tonight? Yes, because Pat Williams is going to share a story, and I love Pat. Are you going to tell us something tonight? No, because, Mark Boss is sharing a story, and that guy's a jerk. No, I wanted to keep it anonymous so that people would come and listen to their community share stories. And that is a huge jump, a huge leap of faith that I was taking with the community to say, are you going to do this? Thank you so much for catching me and for coming out every night. I can't do this without you, and I really, really am in love with you for coming out and listening to each other share stories. Two years ago, I quit my full-time job, my cushy, stable job, to do this full-time. And that is when I stopped looking back. Thank you so much for being here. The last thing I want to say is I try, when I'm up here, to not have this be about me, because it's not. It's about the storytellers and their stories. Because somebody dropped out tonight, I jumped up, and I got a chance to do something that I really love. And so thanks for giving me that opportunity so much. Thanks, Mark. Our next storyteller is a fourth-generation Montanan. Brad Cederberg was born and raised in Missoula. When he's not working with clients as a financial advisor, you might find Brad training for his next mountain bike race, brewing homemade beer, or hiking with his wife, Monica, his sons, Jack and Cormac, and their rescue dog, Mitch. Please welcome Brad Cederberg.
Growing up, my grandmother always stressed the importance of regularity. And I'm not talking about punctuality. I'm talking about bowel movement regularity. To Grandma, having regular and healthy bowel movements was a sign of physical and mental health. And I have to say, growing up, I didn't disagree with her, and I still don't. Try to teach that to my boys. But in the summer of 2005, I learned that not only is it a sign of physical and mental health, but also can teach life lessons. It was 2005, and I was 23, and I was the coolest guy I knew. I was at the top of my world. Down at the bodega, they called me the Prez because I'd been elected student body president at the university here. I had the best job I could possibly think of, bartending at the depot, and it was still, I love that job. And I was dating a beautiful, intelligent sorority girl who would later become my wife. But I was about to be taught a lesson. As part of a student body president, I was invited on a trip to Israel. They were taking rural student leaders and teaching them about Israel and the conflict in the Middle East. And I remember we were doing conference calls and learning about this. And I remember less about the topics and about what we were learning about, another opportunity I passed up at that age to learn, and more about where I fit in the social network of the group of people. I wasn't going to be the smart guy because there were a lot of smart people there. I was never going to be the quiet guy, and so I decided that I was going to be the cool guy and try to keep that going. So as a cool guy, and this would be me sitting in the UC listening to a conference call with a pop collar and a faux hawk and cargo shorts and flip-flops. If you know that guy. And I should have known that a lesson was coming because I grew up in the 1980s and I've seen The Karate Kid and I've seen those movies. And I know that the cool guy at the beginning always gets it in the end. So we get on a long flight and we head to Tel Aviv, and I was able to display two of my cool guy talents, which I still have today. One of which is sleeping. That drives my wife crazy. I can do the wheels up to wheels down sleep on most flights. And also guts of steel, which will come up later. When we get to Tel Aviv, I was surprised. Another child of the 1980s, I thought it was going to be like Indiana Jones. I thought that there would be markets with wicker baskets and people in turbans and one of those guys with a big scimitar sword. But Tel Aviv is not like that at all. It's more like a cross between LA and Phoenix. It's a city by the ocean and kind of built up and grew up in the 50s like LA did, a lot of that similar kind of architecture and feel, but it's got the oppressive heat of Phoenix. And the other thing that surprised me, which was really interesting, was the guns. Now, I wasn't that surprised that there were people with submachine guns and uniforms at Ben Gurion Airport when we arrived, but what I was surprised about was people carrying firearms all over. People in plain clothes with what I guess were Uzis. I don't know names of a lot of guns, but I've been around Montana and I'm not uncomfortable around guns. But what I later came to find out was in Israel, you were required to perform military service. And for 2 years, usually between 18 and 19, you have to serve in the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. And as part of that, you carry a weapon. It's not just to look cool or for intimidation. It's because one of the things we learned is that constantly there, wherever you're at, there's a small fear that there could be a suicide bomb or the building you're in could get hit by an RPG. Now, I don't want to oversell it. They kept us very safe, but we were never without armed guards. And I had fun learning a little bit about the bars and culture of Tel Aviv, but what I brought to them was not any of this wonderful Montana heritage I have. It was Jaeger bombs. So those of you who are about my age maybe know that that's a mixture of Jägermeister and Red Bull, which is awful for you. But that was the cultural gift that I gave to Tel Aviv. So after a few too many Jaeger bombs, I passed out in our rooms in Tel Aviv, and we woke up the next morning and we had a trip scheduled on a tour bus with no bathroom, which will also come up later. But we toured kind of a winding tour. We were headed up to Golan, which maybe you've heard Golan, the Golan Heights. It's an area kind of in the west of Israel that borders Syria that has been in conflict for thousands and thousands of years. But the interesting thing, one of the interesting things to me too, was how close all of these things were in what people call the Holy Land. I grew up going to Sunday school and remember thinking that the trip that Jesus and Mary took from Bethlehem to Jerusalem was just a long road trip. It's 3 miles. It's really interesting. I mean, it's funny, but that was interesting to me. And now I look back and I think of my wife who hiked the M when she was over 9 months pregnant with our first son. And I think, darling, the Virgin Mary has nothing on you. So we go up this winding path to this kibbutz in the Golan Heights. And if you're not familiar with what a kibbutz is, I think it's kind of a combination of a summer camp and a Hutterite colony. And bear with me, because there's a religious center, and oftentimes in a kibbutz, you'll live off the land. People go there to refresh and learn, but also there'll be people that are on their spring break or people that are retirees that come to volunteer. And it was wonderful because after this hot, oppressive heat, we get up in the Golan, you can see Damascus in one direction. The other direction, you see these beautiful fields. This is, after all, the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of civilization. And I remember thinking as we were eating our farm-to-table dinner, first of all, the chicken tastes a little funny, but also that we had these wonderful vegetables, and it was this kind of spiritual thing, and there was a cool breeze, and it was wonderful. So I go to bed and get one of those nights of sleep that you only get after you've had too much to drink the night before, and wake up and feel like a new man. It's starting to get hot, though, and not only temperature-wise out in the air, but like right here in this area. But remember, I've got guts of steel, so I kept it going. And we get on the bus and we start to go down this winding road down from the Golan Heights. And it's a little bit like, I would say the same width and size as like going to the sun, but instead of the beautiful mountains of Glacier Park, you've got something that kind of looks like Joshua Tree National Forest, kind of these weird gnarled pine trees and desert. And my stomach is getting worse. And I start to sweat, and the faux hawk starts to droop just a little bit. And I start to kind of walk up to the front of the bus, and I talk to our tour guide, and I tell her, I'm getting close, still keeping my cool. I'm getting close to needing to go to the bathroom. Can you, next rest stop, can you pull over? And she points out the window, and we look out the window, and there's a yellow sign with a red triangle on it, and it had something written in Hebrew and Arabic and English, and it said, "Danger, minefield." So I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like this, but there are no rest stops in minefields. So we look at finished. I said, okay, and I tried to keep my cool, and I'm a little hunched because I know that if I move and something shifts inside me, then everything will shift inside me. And I say, and I'm sweating now thinking about it. And I ate at El Cazador just now. It was wonderful, and I feel fine. But I look at this tour guide and I say, look, I gotta stop. And I looked at the trash can right next to the bus driver. And she gets the idea, and the bus driver speeds up, the bus lurches, and I almost crap. But I didn't. We get down the edge of bus, and I'm sitting there like this, unable to move, clenched in, like the middle third of my body is immobile. And I see the rest stop, and I get off the bus and I run. And by run, I mean run as fast as you can without moving the middle third of your body. So I waddle as fast as I can, and I get to the rest stop, and right as I get to the door, I feel like a runner, the runner's high when you're about to finish a marathon. I feel like I'm about to do this, and I'm about to evacuate. And someone says, stop. And I stop, and I reclench, and I look down, and there's a little Israeli man sitting next to me, and he's got his hand out with a little cup asking for change. And you've seen this if you've been in European cities, that sometimes people will camp out and ask for money. I said no in slow motion and pushed this nice little Israeli man out of the way and ran into the bathroom and evacuated and unleashed everything. And I felt wonderful, except for when I thought about when I was going to have to go back on the bus. And when I did, to get some change and go pay the man, nobody said a word. And I learned that day that the guy who thought he was the coolest guy in the world, looking back, was not the coolest guy because of what I had or who I was, but of how I treated other people. And I paid the man his change, and I thought Grandma would be proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Bob Zimorino is a father, husband, musician, poet, writer, chef, friend of the planet, dissident, and storyteller. While all of these titles fit him, what truly defines him is his belief in humanity. Please welcome Bob Zimorino.
At the age of 70, my mother had a stroke. She was paralyzed from the neck down, except the use of her right arm and right hand. Pretty limited, though. Complications from diabetes. 4 years later, blind, having lost all of her teeth and on the verge of losing a leg, she called me and she said, "I want to die." And I said, "Well, you've been telling me that since you had the stroke. What's different?" She said, "I'm going to." She decided that she'd stop taking her insulin. She told me she'd have about a week to live and would I come down. So of course I flew to Phoenix and spent her last week just kind of hanging out with her, playing some guitar and talking to her. You know, she had all this stuff go bad, complications from diabetes, and now all of a sudden she was dying. But it was pretty smooth. I mean, she stopped taking her insulin on Sunday. On Wednesday, she went into a coma. Saturday at 11:59 p.m., she passed away. Complications from diabetes. You would think I would learn something from this. Having sat there, having seen what the disease did to her, you would think that I would know better. She was 74, which made me 43, which in my mind was 29, which in man years is 18. I was invincible. I was invincible, and I ate like I was invincible for the next 12 years until I wasn't invincible. At 55, weighing 262 pounds, I was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. The surprising thing about diabetes is how people react when they find out that you have it. People come up to me and say, "I heard you got diabetes." "Yep." "Well, how'd you get that?" It's not the clap, okay? It's diabetes. 29 million Americans have diabetes, 8 million of them undiagnosed. It's out there. How did I get diabetes? I like to tell people like the old John Houseman commercial. I got it the old-fashioned way. I earned it. And I did. We'll talk about that in a little bit, though, because first I want to give you some information that I found out, because I had help with diabetes, as most of us have that have it. I had help, and I wanted to find out how it all came together. So I did some research, and this is some little bit of fact-finding along the way, and then I'll get back into my own story. In the 20s, somebody developed a roller for a milling machine, a third roller, and it took the husks off of grains like rice and wheat, even sugar, actually. What happens when you take the husk off of rice and wheat is you take the nutritional value with it, as well as the fiber, which is the one thing that helps regulate the flow of sugar in your bloodstream. They took and they did this, and we became a white food nation. White rice, white flour, white bread. The problem is, without that nutritional value, 20 years later, people started showing up with beriberi and pellagra, diseases associated with malnutrition. The government hired some scientists to find out why. This is back in the time when government actually believed in science. What the scientists found was there were 25 more nutrients in wheat than there were in white flour. 25 more nutrients in wheat than there were in white flour. We better fix this. So instead of going back to becoming a whole grain nation with brown food, no, we have to stay a white food nation We will enrich this food. So we became an enriched white food nation. You know, Wonder Bread helps build strong bodies in 12 ways. They didn't put any fiber back, but they did put nutrients in. In the 50s, television sets were popping up all over America, just like baby boomers, like myself. This gave advertisers a chance to market directly to children, and they wasted no time doing it. Cereals like Sugar Frosted Flakes, Sugar Crisp, Sugar Pops, Sugar Everything, with animated pitchmen like Tony the Tiger and Cap'n Crunch, the Sugar Bear, the little guy from Lucky Charms. They're magically delicious. There's no magic, it's sugar. And we are addicted. Let's face it, sugar and salt are the two greatest addictions we face as a food nation, and we are hooked. That's why ketchup is such the perfect food. It has both with a little bit of tomato and vinegar. In the 60s, I went to Catholic school. Yes, a little Italian Catholic boy. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Went to Catholic school, and we didn't have a cafeteria, so I had to make my own lunch. And so every morning, it would be me and the Wonder Bread throwing together a sandwich, reaching into the big old snack drawer and pulling out some chips and some HoHos and some Twinkies and some donuts or whatever I could stuff in that bag, and I'd take it to school, oftentimes to trade with friends, but not for anything healthier. I went to my first fast food restaurant in 1968. It was a McDonald's in Rochester, New York. My dad took me. 49 cents got me a burger, a little cup of fries, and a 10-ounce Coke. Now that burger weighed 1.6 ounces. There were 10 to the pound. If you go buy fast food today, they want you to buy at least a quarter pound or a half pound or 3/4 of a pound or a full pound. They give you a wheelbarrow full of French fries and a bathtub full of Coke. How'd we end up diabetic? Good question. I look at what I did in my own life. Let's see, I worked in restaurants. Working in a restaurant, this is a scenario. Zimorino, you've got 10 minutes, go eat. Well, you don't chew your food. I look more like a wood chipper. Gone. And this carried over into my daily life. My wife used to beg me, please chew your food before you swallow. My biggest worry is I'm gonna come home and find you dead with a whole cheeseburger lodged in your throat. I entered food contests, eating contests. How much can you eat? Well, it turns out I could eat a lot. Blueberry pancakes, pizzas, whatever it was that they had out there, hot dogs, I tried them all. The worst was Twinkies. I once ate 52 Twinkies, 26 packs of Twinkies, and then I threw up for 3 days. To this day, I cannot look one in the cream-filled eye. Anybody else here ever been kicked out of a buffet for eating too much? Yeah. Yeah, the Royal Fork. My two buddies and I, we used to play football on Sundays, and we'd go there and eat them out of chicken and potatoes. After 3 weeks, they said, "You're not welcome here. You aren't welcome here." And the more weight that I gained over the years, the less I felt like exercising. It was pretty much a foregone conclusion at some point this was all going to catch up with me. There's no two ways about it. And in the end, it did. Doctor said, got to put you on insulin. I said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something different. And he said, well, you know how you got diabetes? And I said, yeah, my first female relationship was with Little Debbie. I then dated her cousin Sarah Lee. In college, I had a thing for Marie Callender. And these days in my 60s, I got to tell you that Betty Crocker's kind of a hottie. But I'm not that guy anymore. I started exercising. I started eating whole grains. I try to only eat whole grains these days, whether it be pasta, brown rice, or breads, whole grain breads. I stopped treating gravy like it was a beverage. I started walking. Walk. In the wintertime, I walk at the mall. I go flying around that place. I pass all these people left and right. Of course, they are all in their 80s. But I get cruising around the mall pretty good. The rest of the year, I play golf, and 9 holes of golf can net me anywhere from 3 to 5 miles, depending on how well I play. But I'm going to tell you the biggest thing that changed for me, the absolute biggest thing that changed for me. I got rid of my fat clothes. Because you see, they will sit in your closet and they will wait for you to come back. And they would call to me going, "We're here. Every other time you've come back." But this time I was determined not to. XXX these days refers to porn, not my shirt size. Gone are my 44s, my 42s, my 40s, and my 38s. 36s. Same size I wore in high school. Matter of fact, since I lost that weight, I can do the same number of pull-ups as I did in high school. None. But this was the thing. People make this mistake all the time. When they go on a diet, they look back. They keep looking back, and they see themselves as going back to that person again. And as soon as you start seeing yourself becoming that person again, you're on the path to becoming that person again. I made myself a promise this time, and the promise is one that I've stuck to now for 8 years, and that is, don't look back. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So it's a habit I got to get into. Colin Hickey is the Executive Vice President at VidCon. And he's the co-founder and Chief Operating Officer at HP Enterprises, which is a business that compromises services including MissoulaEvents.net, BozemanEvents.net, BoiseEvents.net, and FlatheadEvents.net. He studied stuff at the University of Wyoming. He lasted 2 years there before becoming a rock and roller. Please welcome Colin Hickey.
One night in the summer of 2000, after failing to perform sexually, I decided to stop wearing underwear. Now, at the time, I had convinced myself that the underwear was holding me back. It was slowing me down. Later, I would look back at this and realize that it was probably the 18-pack of Old Milwaukee that I drank that night that was at fault. But I decided to go full commando, and I did for 5 years until a series of unfortunate events brought me back to the land of underwear. So fast forward 5 years, I'm living in Missoula, Montana, and I'm the lead singer of a rock and roll band called the International Playboys. I don't deserve that. The International Playboys were a very fun rock and roll band, and we toured a lot. And touring in a rock and roll band does a lot of things to you. On an average day, you wake up on a floor somewhere. You go and find a greasy spoon where you eat a chicken fried steak. You jump on a van, you drive 8 hours. At some point, you stop for gas, eat a gas station sandwich. You get to the bar, you eat their greasy food or a greasy food somewhere near there. You drink a lot of beer and a lot of whiskey, and you do that every day for 30 days. You can imagine what this does to your insides. Pooping your pants on tour was not uncommon. It was so common, in fact, that we called farting rolling the dice. Because sometimes you got craps. Another thing about tour is showers don't happen often. Washing your clothes is a luxury. Well, when you don't wear underwear, and you have 2 pairs of pants for 30 days, you have to sleep in those pants because you're at some stranger's house, and if in the middle of the night I have to wake up and go to the bathroom, well, I want to be clothed, because that would be horrible. So I would sleep in the pants, so I'm in a van all day, I get real sweaty on stage, and I'm wearing pretty much pant underwear. So you can imagine the smell that would come from your pants. And I'm not gonna like sugarcoat it. It's like just dirty balls and buttholes. So that's strike 1 for no underwear. So we're 2 weeks into a tour. We're in San Marcos, Texas, which was one of our most favorite places to play. They actually had the International Playboy CD on the jukebox, which is pretty fucking cool. We played the show, and we go back to the house that we're gonna stay at that night, and there's the after party. And I find myself in the backyard to smoke a cigarette, and I see this amazing, comfortable couch in the backyard. And I'm like, well, you know, couches are great. I'm gonna sit down on this couch and drink a beer. So I'm back there drinking a beer on this couch for about 10, 15 minutes, when one of the guys that lives there walks outside. And he says, whoa, 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 don't sit on that couch. It's infested with chiggers. So I jump up. First of all, I'm like, what? Why the fuck do you have a chigger-infested couch in your backyard at a party? So I jump up, and I'm just trying to get these invisible mites off my pants. And then I just kind of forget about it, and I get drunk. The night goes on. Next morning, I wake up, and there was a couple red marks, but only a couple. I didn't really put too much thought into it. I kind of forgot about the chiggers. Well, the next night after that, we're waking up in Dallas, Texas, and I wake up, and I have hundreds and hundreds of tiny red bites, mostly on my junk. So, that sucks. And I think, what do? I can't go wash my both pairs of pants because I can't stand in the laundromat with no pants. So I decide to go to the Goodwill and buy 2 new pairs of pants and throw away my chigger-infested pants. So I go to the Goodwill, I find 2 awesome pairs of pants, a pair of black slacks, and the most amazing pair of maroon pants that I'll ever have. They were great. I put on the black ones, and I get some cortisone, because that's what I figured I should do, and I just rub it all over. So 2 weeks go by, and I wake up in Cleveland, Ohio. We had played the night before, and we need to drive to Detroit that day to play there. So halfway there, we stop at a gas station to get gas and some crappy sandwiches. And I walk in, and I'm the money guy, so I pay for the gas, and I'm walking back into the van. And as I step into the van, I roll the dice. Craps. So I'm gonna say about 80% of you have probably pooped your pants as an adult. It's fine. I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hand. Just know that I know. When you poop your pants and you have underwear on, it's gonna catch that poop. There's not much to worry about. Well, as you know, I wasn't wearing underwear. So I'm in the back seat of the van, and I'm like, shit. I gotta get to the bathroom. I don't want to tell the guys, because I would never live that down. So I grab my bag, and I say, hey, I gotta run to the bathroom real quick. And then I'm like, well, how do I get up and get to the bathroom without spreading the mess? So I clench my butt cheeks, and I kind of pull up the crotch of my pants like this. And I make it to the bathroom, and no one even notices me, which is shocking. I make it to the bathroom. It didn't work. I threw away those pants. I threw away my socks. And I had to clean out the inside of my cowboy boots. So, I grabbed that pair of maroon pants, and I put them on. It was like 20 minutes to clean up. Walked back out to the van, and as I'm walking to the van, I put my hand in my pocket, as you would do, and I feel something, and I'm like, what is that? And I pull out a wad of money. A wad. It was $13. But $13 on tour, that is like a night of drinking. Well, it's like 4 beers. It's good to get you started. And then also, with the $13 was a receipt from Taco Bell from 1996. And the change was $13. And I was like, holy shit, these are magical pants. So, later that night, we made it to Detroit. I ended up breaking my leg in a snowstorm, walking to a White Castle. Completely different story that I could tell at another time. We finished the tour, and I got back and I said, I need to write a pros and cons list of wearing underwear. I need to rethink this. So, pros, $13. That's cool. New maroon pants that I loved for like 5 years. Cons, really stinky pants. No protection from chiggers, and no defense for when you poop your pants. So, needless to say, that day, I went out and bought myself some brand new pair of boxer briefs, and I've never looked back. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks again to all of you for coming out to support live storytelling in Missoula. Thank you most of all to our storytellers, Angela Miller, Travis Doria, Sam Martinich, Giorgio, Brad Cederberg, Bob Zimorino, and Colin Hickey. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The next Tell Us Something event is in Helena, Montana at Free Ceramics. We are still looking for storytellers. It's on April 6th. Time is short. If you know anyone in Helena that wants to tell a story, the theme is the first time. Yeah. Call to pitch your story, 406-203-4683. Tickets on sale now at tellussomething.org. For the most up-to-date information about Tell Us Something and upcoming events, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much, everybody. We have the next Tell Us Something event in Missoula is in June. We are looking for storytellers for that. The theme is On the Road. Thank you so much. Have a great night.